Hello, it's Len from Straight Talk from the Homeland. Today it's the 24th of April and we commemorate the 109th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, which started in Constantinople in 1915, just hours before the Anzacs and Allied soldiers invaded at Gallipoli during World War One. It's no coincidence uh, as the Turks decided to eliminate their Christian minorities, including not just Armenians but the Syrians, Pontic Greeks, and others, under what we call the fog of war. And it's very interesting to me that as an Australian New Zealander, we follow the UK's edict, uh, as if we're still some colony of the UK, uh, to not recognise the Armenian genocide, just as the UK shamefully doesn't. And why is that? Uh, did the events at Gallipoli not foretell the emergence of the new nations, Australia and New Zealand, independent of the UK? It seems not. We're sitting here in Armenia, on a day of remembrance for more than uh, 1.5 million people uh, lost, an entire civilization destroyed. And it's quite interesting, a few days before Anzac Day each year, we get these poppies that come on our property and they have Christian crosses on them, both pink and red. Quite interesting. Always reminds me uh, back home how people commemorate using poppies. But more importantly, it saddens me that people back in Australia and New Zealand just commemorate through the lens of military, uh, so that we get the images of soldiers and perhaps rare images of nurses and uh, other people that participated in the conflict. But hardly ever is there a mention of the civilians who are murdered as a result of the actions of both Ottoman Turks and Kurds. For example, the Gallipoli Peninsula was largely populated by Greeks before the invasion, and they were deported. But in fact, most of them were murdered by the tens of thousands. So, why is it that during the Gallipoli commemorations, we as independent nations can't talk about both the military and the civil effects of this disastrous invasion? And here we see my depiction of the what I call three monkeys of Gallipoli. Of course, this is not expected to upset any soldiers. These are representations of political stances where New Zealand, Australia, and the UK are deaf, dumb, and blind to the millions of people that they're sitting on, and that they reported upon. And in some cases, they even defended losing their lives during this World War One conflict. Uh, in the Melbourne Age, for example, there were literally dozens of articles about the extermination of Armenians, and Armenians who were forced to fight for the Ottomans were captured. So they told the stories of the destruction of their villages, the uh, theft of their properties, and of course the war correspondents told these stories. And afterwards there was huge uh, problems with orphans because they killed everybody above I think the age of 7 or 8, leaving tens of thousands of orphans. And so, one thing that Australians and New Zealanders can be proud of is the fact that during and after the war, there was great efforts to try and help these orphans. In fact, I believe the largest orphanage was in Lebanon, supported by brave missionary, mostly women from Australia and New Zealand. So here we see in this image everybody saying yes, it's genocide. Who was involved in the Gallipoli campaign? Even those states who were not involved, like the United States, now say that of course it was genocide. Uh, and of course Hitler took his inspiration from the genocide, was known to speak before his invasion of Poland in 1939, who now remembers the Armenians. So why is it that we are deaf, dumb, and blind to the destruction of an entire civilization? Is it because of the economic interests of the UK? Is it because the United States would prefer we don't rock the boat with Turkey? Well, the United States themselves recognises the genocide. So do the Ottoman Empire's allies, Germany and the Austro-Hungary Empire at the time. So what happened with the property of an entire indigenous civilization? Well, the Turks, who didn't make arms during World War One, used these to partly pay for the weapons that they imported from Germany. And after the war had concluded, the righteous British and French found this money in the Reichsbank, and guess what they did with it? Instead of returning uh, this to the survivors, to Armenia uh, after the war, they transferred it through JP Morgan Bank in Paris to exchange for US Treasury bonds. So, in other words, the Allies enriching themselves from the blood money wrought from the destruction of an entire civilization. I can't express how disgusting this is. Of course, the West has done this many times, making themselves rich on genocides around the world. But here is an example of an entire civilization destroyed that had existed for centuries, for thousands of years. So I'll finish now with a small poem that I put together just to describe how I see the connections between the Gallipoli landings, which took place only about 6 hours after the commencement of the Armenian genocide just up the road in what was then called Constantinople, now called Istanbul. Uh, and I call this On Anzac Day We Stand and Think. It's dedicated to these innocent folk who lost their lives and their civilization, uh, their entire meaning as a people, really, which is now subsumed into what we call Eastern Turkey, and even the mother mountain of Armenians, Ararat, which they call Masis, was taken. So on Anzac Day, we stand and think. It's dedicated to the souls that lost their lives, and may they rest in peace after a century of denials. On windswept hills the Turks await, among sweet thyme and bush ablaze. From distant lands men know their fate, from ships they stare to hell amaze. They stood for right against our foes, to fight the Turks Great Britain called, an empire dying its final throes, killing its people, the world appalled. Christian soldiers forced to fight for the Ottoman threat to rear, for the Pasha using might against Armenians full of fear. On Anzac Day we stand and think, why fight here now, this blood-stained cove? Excitement gone, in a blink, into horror brave men drove. Now we read a mournful story of tragedy and tale so bold, but do we remember history, or only partial truth we're told? Anzac soldiers' muddy trench, cry for our fallen heaven sent, the smell of dead and dying stench, weep also for the innocent. You can hide it, fog of war, preaching murder it was not, but it's a truth we can't ignore, Christian suffering never forgot. On Anzac Day we stand and think of sacrifice at Gallipoli, but we fought for right, thus the link. Blind to genocide we cannot be. This is Len from Straight Talk from the Homeland. I hope on this Anzac Day we remember all that suffered, and we remembered that we became independent nations so we can recognise the Armenian genocide and those other peoples who perished during this time.